my phone on silent.
Okay, and we are live. Welcome everyone to another Reason podcast. I'm afraid Darren is away holidaying, so is Alex Armstrong, but we've got the fabulous Eunice and Nicholas here with us tonight. There's been a lot going on because we have had two conferences happening. We had the Reform Conference and now we've had the Labour Conference rumbling on. Let us know in the comments if you went to the Reform Conference. Maybe you went to the Labour Conference, but I'm not sure how many of our viewers will have attended, to be honest. And let us know what your favourite moments were, favourite speeches. So we're going to be taking a little look at both of those conferences as well as various other things. Nicholas was able to attend the Reform Conference. Sadly, myself and Eunice were not able to, so we'll be suddenly letting Nicholas fill us in. So first of all, let's just have a look at Nigel's entrance into the Reform Conference. So this was Nigel.
Can you zoom it in a little bit, Chloe? Oh, yeah, there we
go.
There we go.
I'm still learning the tech on this thing. We'll figure it out eventually. So that's Nigel coming in to the Reform Conference. He's got fireworks, he's got a filled out stadium there, huge cheers, clearly a lot of love for him. People seem to like him a bit more than Keir Starmer, don't they, Nicholas?
Oh, completely. I mean, I was on staff at the Reform Conference, and I was, of course, there the night before the conference opened. I was involved in the planning of everything. And Nigel's entrance was one of the most meticulously choreographed events of the whole day. He was originally meant to come out from the back, but he decided he wanted to go out from the front instead and actually walk through the crowds, which made for a very powerful image. And, of course, you have the sparklers, which I was watching them set up the previous night. I must say, all the time and effort that went into this conference was just astounding. And I truly wish everyone could have seen all the behind-the-scenes things that went on, because it was like clockwork. It was a fantastic operation, and yes, Nigel is very much more liked than Keir Starmer. I was in the hall when he went on. I was actually situated on top of the Brexit bus, or the Battle Bus, whatever they like to call it, and I was looking around at the entire stadium, watching 4,500 people scream and cheer as Nigel walked in. It was a very powerful sight. And I'll tell you right now, I'd say the Reform Conference has been a hell of a lot livelier than the Labour Conference. I mean, everyone at the Reform Conference was so happy, smiles abound, whilst at the Labour Conference it's sort of an atmosphere of dread, even though they're the ones in power. And we ended up with 5 seats after being cheated by our first-past-the-post electoral system. So overall, I'd say that Reform is in a much better state than Labour at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing that such a small party with only 5 MPs has been able to put on such a powerful, incredible event by the looks of it. Now, Eunice, you weren't able to attend, but I think that you can certainly see from that clip and from many clips we saw Nigel Farage arriving at the Doncaster races, everyone wanting to get selfies with him and chat to him, whilst Keir Starmer was booed on the way in. Now, I think it's clear that Nigel Farage is more of a powerful, exciting figure than Keir Starmer is. But I'm just thinking how they're going to fare against the Tories. It's looking like Robert Jenrick is probably going to win the leadership election. You might disagree. Maybe you think it will be someone like Kemi. I mean, let me know what you think, Eunice. But if he is against someone like Robert Jenrick, how do you think that's going to play out? Given, I mean, you might think differently, but I think Robert Jenrick seems like quite a plain personality compared to Nigel. How much do you think that personality is worth versus policy?
So I think Robert Jenrick is going to win. And unfortunately, in the politics that we have now, we just have a bunch of career politicians that have no charisma whatsoever. Keir Starmer being one of them, Rishi Sunak was another one, and Jenrick is another one. And Nigel Farage is the rock star of British politics. And you said that we only have 5 seats, but as Nicholas said, we got 6 million votes, or more than 4 million votes.
So we should have 4.1 million.
Yeah, 4.1 million. So in reality, we should have 150 seats. But because of the system that we have, we only have 5 seats, which is ridiculous. Reform are the 3rd biggest party in the country right now. In some polls, they're even bigger than the Conservatives. So I just don't buy it, and I think like our electoral system needs a reform. In terms of going forward, I feel like people are just fed up of establishment politicians because I was watching the Labour conference. It was just a snooze fest, Keir Starmer's speech and everyone just coming up. Whereas reform, it was energy, there was people, there was like almost like a Trump rally. Nigel Farage is our Donald Trump, but then the problem is again, it's one individual going against the establishment. And as we know, the establishment, the mainstream media, BBC, they don't like Nigel Farage, right? So they will do anything in their power to stop. But the people are awake. The people are right behind Nigel Farage. He's a very popular character, as you said. He goes everywhere and there's people like lining up to take pictures with him. Whereas when Keir Starmer goes to a pub, the pub owner tells him to get out of his pub. So he's a popular character. But as I know, this is not a fair game. This is the unfortunate thing. This is not a fair game. Popular characters, they get vindicated by the media. You can see it with Trump in America, and you can see it with Nigel Farage here.
Yeah, and I just want to also show you guys another clip from the conference of, not Nigel this time, but Richard Tice. Hopefully you guys can see this all right. This, I felt like this just showed that it is a party that's just willing to say what everyone's thinking, but everyone else is too cowardly to say. So take a listen to what Richard Tice had to say here.
And they're in the water if they're off their vessel.
Maritime law says if they're in distress, if they're in danger. Read the treaty. I've read it. I know the clauses. I know the sentences.
So every migrant on a small boat falls into that category.
Absolutely right. Of course. How many people have died this year? Literally died. Do you know? 45 that we know of crossing the channel. If they'd followed my policy of pick up and take back, all those people would be alive. This kind and compassionate bollocks from these lefty lawyers, these human rights people, the media, it's killing people. It's blood on your hands, all of you.
Okay, well then can I ask, if it's that easy, and if that's within the law, why isn't it happening?
Because they haven't got the courage of their convictions. And also, lots of people on this side of the channel, lots of big businesses and lawyers are making a huge amount of money, thank you very much, and hotel owners, so they don't want it to stop. But if the Australians did it, what are the Belgians doing? The Belgian authorities are complying with their international treaty law. They're picking up and taking back, and guess what? The boat stopped. The French need to do the same. If they don't, we must do it on their behalf.
Okay.
Well, Nicholas, what do you think? Do you think that he's got the law wrong and actually he can't take the boats back? Or do you think that all the politicians that are saying, we got to send them to Rwanda, we got to smash the gangs or whatever it is, they're just missing the obvious trick and are too scared to do it?
Well, Richard Tice is absolutely right, and he has the courage of his convictions. I mean, he's a very powerful speaker. In fact, I thought that his address at the conference was second to Nigel, quite frankly. I mean, he gave a really terrific, passionate speech, and I'm not just saying this because I work for Isabel. I'm saying this because I truly mean it. And I actually remember being just off camera as he gave that interview, as I tried to shadow him for a bit during the conference, at the request of a couple of people. And the way in which he speaks and the way in which he articulates himself is incredibly powerful. And he is one of the only politicians in the House of Commons right now that's actually really, really, really capable of speaking their mind, but more importantly, capable of articulating their points in such a way that everybody can understand and everybody can agree with him. Because let's face it, he knows what he's talking about. Most of these talking heads from the Labour Party have no idea what they're going on about. I mean, look at Wes Streeting's interview yesterday. He comes across like he has absolutely no idea what he's doing, probably because he doesn't. Meanwhile, we can see this with reform. We saw this with Lee Anderson's speech. We saw this with James McMurdoch's speech, Reuben Lowe's speech, Zia Youssef's speech. We know what we're doing. These people are worth their weight in salt. Our representatives, even though we were cheated out of 100-odd MPs, as Eunice said, we have 5 really brilliant ones. And I'll tell you right now, Richard Tice is doing a spectacular job, and he is absolutely right. All of these politicians who are demanding we spend tens of millions on taxpayer dime to send all these people off to Rwanda, really, all we need to do is pick them up, take them back to France.
I mean, that's a really interesting point you make, Nicholas, about the fact that the Reform MPs we've got, although we've only got 5 of them, they're very strong and they really know what they're talking about. Whereas a lot of the Labour MPs, not just MPs, but the people, top of cabinet, seem to have no idea what they're talking about. Because the argument that's often made against voting reform is, their heart's in the right place. They're talking a lot about the issues that people care about, but we can't really trust them to run the country. They're brand new. They've got no idea what they're talking about. I mean, Eunice, what do you think? Do you think if, let's say next general election, Reform were able to pull off something magnificent that might involve a coalition, that might not, and they were able to get into power, do you think that they would actually be experienced enough to run the country properly?
Yes, 100%. I think this past general election, they were experienced enough, because all you had to do, you had to read through their contract with the people, or manifesto, as other parties call it, and you look at the policies, and is the policies exact policies that this country needs. And actually, I was going to stand as an MP reform for West Ham, and I actually spoke to Richard Tice over the phone, but then because they told me about it on Friday and the deadline was on Monday, I couldn't get my papers in on time, and there was a whole vetting process, and unfortunately I couldn't get it. But as I was talking to Richard Tice over the phone, he told me that, look, we know that we probably won't win any London boroughs. So all you have to do is you just have to go and stand there, and we have to try to get as many votes. And I was like, why is that, Richard? Why don't you believe in yourself that you can win any boroughs in London? And he was like, look, our system is corrupt. We have the Conservatives and Labour that are going to dominate. That seat will most likely go to a Labour politician. But I was like, look, West Ham is actually a very diverse area. Because, I've worked in the West Ham Stadium, and you get a lot of people very passionate about politics, and you get people coming in, they have all kinds of different opinions, and they don't seem like the type that would vote for Labour. I was like, actually, as a matter of fact, I think that a lot of people in West Ham would be voting for reform. And he said, yeah, you're right, but at the same time, we don't have the game grounds, we don't have the money that these other parties have, like Labour and Conservatives, we don't have the same amount of donors that they have. So unfortunately, reform needs to get the donors, need to get the ground game strong, where people go and knock on doors, give leaflets, that kind of thing, because that's what actually wins election. And what they need to do between now and 2029 is to just recruit people and get their game down, get their market. I mean, in terms of marketing, Reform is brilliant. Okay, I think they are the biggest party on social media, especially TikTok. So in terms of social media, they got it right. They just need to get the ground game. They need to get their media game up, and they have to give this belief to people that, look, we can win. We can win the seats. Because the last election, they kind of, were talking in a way, as Richard was talking, that they kind of knew they're not going to win, But the next general election, they have to have this aura about them, like, we can win. We can do it. That's one, solution. Another solution is for them to collate with the Conservative Party, but I'm not really sure how likely that will be.
I mean, the Tories have shown themselves completely unwilling to have any sort of rapprochement with Reform. I do think that potentially Robert Jenrick, as the leader of the Conservative Party, he and Farage could become a sort of Cameron and Clegg type duo if the situation calls for it. But I think overall, Eunice, you're absolutely right. I mean, there is a change in the atmosphere at Reform. There's a new can-do attitude. I mean, Zia Yusuf strived to professionalise the party. He's cut off a lot of the staff, and he's leaving like the pure nice meat. And quite frankly, I think going into 2029 and even next year at the local elections, Reform is in a fantastic space right now.
And they've been able to get more. They've been able to get more cash now. So, for example, you can see if you look online that they are hiring various regional coordinators and whatnot. They've got the cash to pay for more staff now. By just for each member of Parliament they have a certain pot of money that they get for them to have staff in Parliament and whatnot. So cash was definitely an issue early on, but now slowly but surely, as they've shown, we are actually a serious party and we can make big waves. Things are starting to change. Just before we move. We've got loads of comments coming in, people angry about Starmergate, freebie Keir, or whatever you want to call it. We will be moving on to everything going on with Labour shortly. But just before we move on, Nicholas, you were talking there about Robert Jenrick, who the Tories are going to pick, how it's going to affect Reform. I'm just interested to see, do you think that in terms of how they fare against Reform, will a centrist candidate or a more Reform-like candidate, one who copies Reform's policies, be a better option for the Tories?
Well, obviously, look, for Reform, our dream would be Tom Tugendhat, because, I mean, this would be absolutely beautiful Reform. We'd probably win 60 to 70 seats if Tom Tugendhat became the leader of the Conservative Party, even with our rigged electoral system. Though overall, I would prefer a more centrist or more wet candidate to lead the Conservative Party, simply because that would aid reform. But in terms of how the Conservatives are actually going to claw back, talking from their perspective, of course they want a more reform-like politician, somebody like Kemi Badenoch or Robert Jenrick, or ideally for them, Suella Braverman, if she hadn't been bullied out of any position of power in the party.
Well, you say it like it's obvious, but they've had people like George Osborne consulting them, telling them that the way they're going to win is to move back to the centre. You've got people like George Osborne suggesting that the reason why they lost the election is that they were too right-wing. I mean, you just cannot make it up. I don't know what kind of rock these guys are living under.
Can someone explain what the centre is? Yeah,
if I recall correctly, George Osborne is no longer in Parliament, so he shouldn't really be saying anything.
No, well, you've got loads of these people who are just trying to remain relevant. I mean, we've got Tony Blair trying to run the government as well. Everyone's trying to tell everyone, I'm an old guy, I know what I'm talking about, blah, blah, blah.
There is no such thing as the centre, because I feel like our politics has gone so far to the left, that the centre now is actually centre-left and centre is centre-right. So actually, I think I see Reform as a centre-right party, but they come across as a far-right party because now the centre has moved to centre-left. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
so,
of course.
So unfortunately, the Conservatives just don't understand that. I made videos about this. The Conservatives are not conservative anymore. They are centrist or centre-left, and Labour is actually far-left. So the only centre-right party in this country is actually Reform.
Yeah. Anyways, so
agreed.
guys, I want to move on.
Yeah.
Everyone has been in the comments angrily posting about freebie Keir, and don't worry, we are going to talk about it. Not just Keir, but the rest of the party as well, because we're going to start off with this clip of Wes Streeting, which I honestly thought was quite shocking and showed him to be pretty out of touch. So this was with the BBC at Labour conference. Take a listen to this.
I'm really proud of people who want to contribute not just their time and volunteering, but their money to our politics. It is a noble pursuit, just like giving to charity, and we don't recognise that enough. The alternative is we ask taxpayers to fund our politics. I think they'd rather their taxes went into the NHS and our schools or stayed in their own pockets.
It's going to a Taylor Swift concert, a noble cause.
I'm sure Keir will shake it off. But let me say, Nick, I'm absolutely delighted in the BBC's newfound conviction that no one should be paid more than the Prime Minister, that they shouldn't give or receive hospitality, and will judge the performance on the social media mentions.
You can get enough mansions, though. You can get mansions and jackets and glasses. You can get gifts for thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds, but you can't give £25. Okay, good to know.
Yeah, I mean, the problem here, guys. So this was in response to all the accusations about all the Lord Alli freebies, right? And Wes Streeting has just justified it by saying, oh, it's a very noble thing to do, like giving to charity. If Lord Alli was just donating to what the party essentially needs to function, then okay. But Taylor Swift tickets, glasses that cost thousands of pounds, Keir Starmer having some big fancy box at football games, right? You don't need that. It's completely unnecessary. And to liken that to, say, giving to charity to save starving children in Africa, I think is pretty out of touch, if you ask me. And then he justifies it again by saying in that clip that, oh, well, it's great that Lord Alli has contributed, because if he didn't, we'd have to pay for all this stuff with your taxpayer money instead, and I'm sure people would rather keep their money. And I'm like, hang on, you don't need that stuff at all. What kind of high horse are you living on where you think that having all of these fancy freebies, designer gloves, designer glasses, huge elite boxes to be in at football games rather than having to, be with us plebs in the stalls, that's not something taxpayers should be paying for. You don't need it at all. I mean, Eunice, what do you think of this? How do you think this is going to affect Wes Streeting's image? Do you think Labour members are going to buy this?
No, because again, it's corruption at its finest. And this Labour Party is probably one of the most corrupt political parties I've seen in this country for a long time. Because they pretend they are for the working man, they're far left, but actually their policies hurt the working man. As you know, the winter fuel payments, raising taxes on working class and middle class people. So I don't know why and how they're able to get away with this. At the same time, they get gifts from their millionaire friends to go and sit in a box at Arsenal or get, glasses for thousands of pounds. So, it's like almost like the communist Soviet Union, where the guy at the top was getting all the freebies, he's living the good life, and everyone else was poor. Obviously not that extreme, but this is like a neo-Marxist government, and I just find them extremely disingenuous and extremely corrupt.
Nicholas?
Well, I mean, to circle back to the Farage thing, one of my favourite moments from the Reform Conference was when he took the stage and immediately got a pair of glasses out of his pocket.
Oh, we're gonna show that actually. You know what? Let's show that now. Seeing as I have that one open. So this is what Nigel Farage did to take the piss out of freebie Starmer, and I think it's absolutely brilliant.
Loved it.
Wow. Now just give me a second. Just give me a second. Do you like them? Very expensive. But guess what? I bought them myself. How about that?
Hey.
Brilliant. Well, that got quite a cheer, didn't it? But just before I come back to you, I just want to go through a couple more things on this story before we talk about it all. So this is a new thing that we've just had revealed sort of today and or yesterday, which I thought, again, was just absolutely shocking. So the glasses, Starmer got, I think it was 18 grand from Lord Alli to spend on clothes and glasses. His glasses cost thousands each. I mean, I thought that I was splashing the cash when I decided to get a pair that cost about 200 quid from Vision Express, but I guess that was cheap. But this story has come out, which I think is quite shocking, especially in light of the fact that Keir Starmer is currently pursuing his very controversial policy of slapping VAT on private school fees, which is, you know, there are a lot of families that can only they count the pennies to make the fees. They're not all rich millionaires, and this is going to push a lot of those people out of access to that education. And I think it's super hypocritical when we've just found this out. So more money has come from Lord Alli in the form of 20 grand for Keir Starmer's son to have a quiet place to stay during his GCSE exams. And you're thinking, well, how long did he put him up for? Because even if the kid was staying, let's say they got him his own flat and he was staying there for a year, I mean, 20 grand is still quite a lot for a place, but it wasn't for that long. So the dates of the stay were from the 29th of May to the 13th of July. 20 grand for a stay that short. I mean, where the hell were they putting him up in some huge mansion? And then it also doesn't quite add up when you think of the dates of the exams. So the exams started 20 days before he supposedly got this quiet place on the 9th of May, and it finished well before, on the 19th of June. So this just doesn't add up. What is going on? And this was the excuse that Keir Starmer gave, which, you know, again, like Wes Streeting's excuse there for likening Lord Alli's money to giving to charity, I just think it's pathetic. He says, my boy 16 was in the middle of his GCSEs. I made him a promise that he would be able to get to his school, do his exams without being disturbed. We have lots of journalists outside our house where we live, and I'm not complaining about that. That's fine. But if you're a 16-year-old trying to do your GCSEs and it's your one chance in life, I promised him we would move somewhere, get out of the house and go somewhere where he could be peacefully studying. Now, I can understand if you're a high-profile politician, your life is disturbed by all these journalists outside your house and whatnot. Maybe the kid needs a bit of peace and quiet. Most people would say go and stay at auntie's house, go stay at grandma's house where it's a bit quieter. Or if the kid's really lucky, okay, maybe you spend a couple of grand on getting him a little studio flat or whatever it is where he can go study for a month. But 20 grand in donor money just for somewhere to stay. I mean, it's just bonkers. And just before we chat about all this Lord Alli stuff, I just want to look at Bridget Phillipson's excuse for all this money from Lord Alli. This was Camilla Tominey talking about the birthday party that Lord Alli paid for, and she claims it was a work event. And I think Camilla Tomney did a very good job here.
About this story in the Mail on Sunday, the suggestion that Lord Alli paid thousands for Education Secretary's 40th birthday party. Is that true?
So what Lord Alli, who's a long-standing Labour peer, paid for was 2 events when I was Shadow Education Secretary. One ahead of my 40th birthday. Thought was a good opportunity in a professional context to get journalists, education people, trade unionists and MPs along.
Yes.
The second event, a reception for journalists, including those working in the education press, again in a professional context, to discuss the work of...
So the birthday element was what then? I don't quite get it. It was an official do for you as Shadow Education Secretary, but you also had some cake.
Oh, we didn't have any cake.
Oh, there's a picture of you with some cake. Is that a different...
That was on my actual birthday.
Oh, got it, okay.
In my office.
Alli, so you do have a birthday celebration, but it's part of a department...
It was when I was Shadow Education Secretary, so it was ahead of the election. I should just say I didn't even invite my own family along to this. It was very much in a professional
context. Has Lord Alli ever donated to your wardrobe, your spectacles? Has he ever loaned you an apartment in London or New York?
No, everything that's been donated to me has been declared in line with the rules. What I would say about Lord Alli is that he's been a Labour peer for, I think, over 25 years.
Yes.
Donates to the Labour Party, to Labour politicians, because he wants a Labour government.
But he got a temporary Downing Street pass. From Sue Gray, we hear today, Labour Party have been very reluctant to say who sanctioned this pass. It was Sue Gray. That happened after he donated £10,000 to Leon Conlon's campaign. Leon Conlon is now the MP for Beckenham and Penge. He's also Sue Gray's son. There's something quite murky about that. I think if that arrangement had happened under a Tory government, ministers like you would be on the airwaves having a real go at the opposition about that.
I think you've got a Labour peer, a very, very long-standing Labour peer, who donates to Labour politicians, Labour candidates.
Donated to 2 campaigns, and one of them was Conlon's. No, he's Sue Gray's. In the election campaign, as far as just for the election campaign, he gives money to Sue Gray's son. And the next thing we know, he gets a Downing Street pass. You have to admit, that looks a bit dodgy.
He's donated to lots of Labour candidates and politicians.
Why does he need a Downing Street pass?
As I understand it, he no longer has a Downing Street pass.
Why did he have one?
I genuinely don't know the circumstances of that. Come on. No, I think the reason that he donates to Labour politicians is because he wanted to secure a Labour government. That's what he's done over 2 decades.
All right.
Absolutely pathetic excuses there from Bridget Phillipson, and that was just one of many interviews that she did with various outlets across Labour conference, just trying to excuse this scandal and not take any responsibility or any blame for any wrongdoing whatsoever. And we saw Angela Rayner doing a similar thing, defending herself about the use of this fancy penthouse in New York. I mean, Eunice, do you think, optics-wise, do you think it's better for the Labour Party to keep doing what they're doing, where they just keep defending themselves and insisting they've done nothing wrong? Or do you think that people, the British public, would appreciate a bit of humility and for them to put their hands up and say, look, we messed up?
I mean, again, as I said, they're extremely corrupt, and it's quite funny because, Nigel Farage always, walks out with these tailor-made suits and they all look nice. I'm a fan of looking after yourself and looking good, yeah? And they made this story about him that, oh, well, he's an MP. He earned like $1 million last year or over 100 grand last year from GB News. That has a corrupting... But the guy made his money on GB News because he worked, and he's the figurehead of GB News. So he deserves every single penny that he gets from GB News. Why do I care how rich a politician is? As a matter of fact, I prefer rich politicians because then they don't really get into politics to make money. Whereas Labour, all their MPs, I just feel like they are crony capitalists and they get into politics to make money. So they have an incentive. And Keir Starmer, he's using donor money to send his son to a quiet place so he can study. As you said, Chloe, the dates don't make sense. But then how is he even allowed to do such a thing? That money is supposed to be spent on party, to keep the party going, to have conferences, to expand the parties, recruit staff, etc., etc., etc. So I think this should go to court, actually. These kind of things should go to court and be tried as corruption cases, because this is corruption. You're just giving free gifts to your friends, to your family members. You're setting up all these events and you're going on all partying with donor money. That you're not supposed to do that. I'm pretty sure there's a law against that. So why are they not being prosecuted for this?
Yeah, it seems like politicians just don't seem to get held to account at all. We say, we hold them to account because they have elections, but they tell us all these lies to get in, and then they just do whatever they want and break all of the rules. I mean, I know that Parliament is able to sort of investigate people, and sometimes they suspend them for a few days.
I guarantee you, if this was Nigel Farage, he would be prosecuted. I guarantee you. If Nigel Farage done something like this, he would have been in the courts right now.
Absolutely. I mean, Nicholas, just going back to the education thing. So, just thought this comment was funny from NRH O'Connor. From the river to the sea, Stasi Sarmer's son goes private for free. It just seems pretty hypocritical when he's saying, we need to crack down on private schools. It's not fair that people have an advantage. But then your son gets to have 20 grand spent on some fancy place so that he can study in quiet. I mean, remember what happened in COVID when we had lockdown, when some kids who had a big house with their own little study room and whatnot and fast Wi-Fi and good tech, they did fine. But you had plenty of kids who weren't at private school, didn't have great online learning, and then were in a house where you had everyone in the family packed around the kitchen table on the slowest Wi-Fi, just trying to get through their GCSEs. Don't you think this just seems like quite a slap in the face?
Oh, it's a massive slap in the face, and the Labour Party are now so honest about their elitism. They are champagne socialists, and the champagne is bought by Lord Alli. What a joke. What a complete and utter joke. And the fact of the matter is, Bridget Phillipson, she keeps claiming how all Lord Alli is doing is trying to help Labour win elections. Well, I don't see how giving Starmer's son 20 grand is going to win Labour the election. No. It's quite clear that Alli is buying
seems like
influence.
buying privilege.
And also, Exactly, and also, what exactly was Keir Starmer's son doing? Because, as you point out, the exams had begun 3 weeks earlier, and I find it very odd how he decided to keep this place throughout June. Now, I remember when my exams ended at school, they were over by June. All were over by June. So what exactly was he doing in this place with 20 grand? What was he doing? Did Lord Alli pay for Keir Starmer's son to go out on one massive bender until the middle of July? Probably fine, we'll never know. But it seems oddly suspicious how he just so happens to need this quote-unquote quiet place after the exams, at least most of them, are already over. I just don't buy it. And the fact that Starmer, whatever this money was used for, I also don't like the fact that Starmer was so quick to throw his own son under the bus by involving him in all of this. Like, oh, no, couldn't possibly be me. It was my son this money was for. It's the measure of a man, how he treats his child, and he has just exposed his kid to all manner of public scrutiny. He's not doing him any favor.
Yeah, but another caveat to this, as you said, he makes fun of people that went to private schools and how they're so spoiled and, blah, blah, blah. I came from a working class family. My dad used to be a tool maker. All of these lies he comes up with. And then afterwards, your son can go and get a room in 10 Downing Street and study quietly by himself. This is just the biggest excuse. Either your son is the biggest spoiled brat ever, and you've done a terrible job of raising him, or you're lying about something. You probably sent him away and you probably laundered that money, or you just paid for him to go and party, as you said, because I remember the same thing. I have a little brother. He's 17 years old. He had his GCSEs, and all his GCSEs were over by June. So how is this guy keeping it by middle of July? It just doesn't make sense to me.
There's definitely something more to this, something way more to this. And of course, this is a massive slap in the face, as Chloe pointed out, to all the people who during the pandemic had their educations wrecked. My final year was totally ruined by the pandemic, having to rely on very terrible Wi-Fi, which made my picture quality look astounding right now. My picture quality right now is 4K compared to what I used to have because of the horrendous Wi-Fi. And it's a miracle that anybody passed. Absolute miracle. And they're just flaunting their elitism. They think that they're invincible. They think the British public aren't going to care, but you know what? We do care. And I'll tell you right now, people are not going to forget about this next year, and they're certainly not going to forget about this when the polls open in 5 years' time. They're just not.
I think it will be really interesting to see if this VAT raid on private schools is eventually reversed, either by Labour because of pressure or another party coming in eventually, because I think, I mean, the Independent Schools Council, they've done reports with various predictions about how many private schools they think are going to have to close down as a consequence of this. You've got a lot of, not every private school is some big fancy school like Eton. You've got a lot of little small scale private schools that just manage to balance the books and just manage to keep their kids in the education there. I was very, very lucky. I went to an absolutely horrendous secondary school, and I worked hard to get a bursary for a private sixth form, and I got an 80% bursary. 20% of the fees was all that my parents could just about scrape together to afford, and that opportunity honestly transformed my life. That school was amazing, and I loved it. But they've got a very limited bursary pot to offer people like me who've worked hard, who don't come from a rich background, to give them an opportunity to get a good education there. Those schools that don't have tons of money, but they really work hard to try and make space for a certain number of students each year to help them financially to get in, they're not going to have that pot of money anymore. So if you ask me, this is meant to be a policy that breaks down, stops private schools being so elite, but I think it makes them more elite because it means that the fees go up, there are fewer bursaries available, and it's only the most rich people that are able to afford it, not the middle class parents that count the pennies that just about get their kids there, or the kids that are having their fees all or partially paid for by the school on bursaries. I think it's really problematic. But before we move on to Keir Starmer's speech at conference and how disastrous that was with his talk of the sausages, someone just said, to be fair, she needs a 68k on a photographer. So this was just one other of the Sleazy stories. So Angela Rayner has been found to have spent 68 grand, another load of money spent. I can't remember if it was Lord Alli's money or taxpayer money, but she spent it on a photographer. And like many of these, there's a tweet from several years ago of them attacking the Tories for the exact same thing. So she said, instead of spending more taxpayers' money on more photographers for the sake of his own vanity, the Prime Minister should prioritise feeding the children who will go hungry in half-term next week and families facing £1,000 cuts to universal credit. Well, look, I mean,
I would pay 68 grand not to see pictures of Angela Rayner.
I mean, the thing is, she's been given these designer clothes. So I saw a picture of her walking into conference with Keir Starmer, and she's got this big white dress on, which is probably one of these designer clothes that she's got gifted.
I mean, her fashion sense is horrendous, by the way.
It's
awful,
the
stuff that
right?
she wears sometimes. It's just like clown. But yeah.
The dress had a belt on it, but the belt wasn't tucked back in the second loop, so it was all sort of hanging out and flapping all over the place. Mm-hmm. And then in terms of jewellery, what did she have on? She had her Apple Watch on one hand, and then a frayed yarn friendship bracelet on the other hand. I mean, maybe she should invest in a private stylist. Sense. I don't know. I mean, none at all.
The thing is, I always said this: you can look good with £30 and you can still look rubbish with £30,000. And I feel like Angela Rayner is one of those people that will spend 30k and still look like a clown. Like, amount of pictures I've seen on her on Twitter, just people making fun of her, looking like a cartoon character or something. And every time she goes to Parliament, she either dresses in a single color head to toe or has all these different colors. Like, she doesn't know how to mix and match. But other than that, it's just extremely, what's the word, it's very vanity and a very sorry, I forgot the word, or vague, or almost arrogant. Vague. Why do you need a foot? Yeah, why do you need to pay someone 68 grand to take pictures of you? Why is that? Take pictures of what exactly? You have the BBC there, you have the ITV there, you have all these different publications taking pictures of you all the time anyway. Why do you need that? It's just, it doesn't make sense to me.
Anyway, moving on to the sausages. We're just going to touch briefly a little bit before we move on from Labour Party conference on Keir Starmer's speech. Now, his speech, I don't think that it was a complete disaster in every way, but I certainly don't think it's a speech that anyone's going to remember. It was pretty dull, but there was one point which I thought was pretty embarrassing. Let's take a listen.
Of the sausages. For hostages.
Now that
I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. The return of the sausages. For hostages.
Yeah. I mean, unbelievable. I mean, one of the points of the speech where you've actually got to make a pretty serious point and you accidentally say the return of the sausages. I mean, how embarrassing is that, Eunice?
Pretty embarrassing, and I just don't like the way he talks. I don't know, is it just me, or is his accent just?
I don't think anybody does. It's not just you, and I don't think
it's very disingenuous.
He
sounds
speaks very monotone.
The...
I don't think it's just a case of we only like posh accents. We don't like working class accents. He speaks very.
It's not a working class accent though.
No,
it's not a working class. It's actually it's like a bad version of a posh accent, in my opinion. It's like a bad version of a posh accent. It sounds like a character in a these cartoons I used to watch, British cartoons where they used to make them from clay. I don't know, I forgot the name of the cartoon, but it still sounds like a villain in one of those. But yeah, I mean, Return of the Sausages. I mean, that's what we come to. I put that on my story, and I feel like I got the most amount of reactions. And probably Hamas and Hezbollah, they probably look at this, and they probably look at Biden and Kamala Harris, and they're like, we hope these people get elected. We really hope, because the more we have these left-wing lunatics in power, the less likely they will do anything, and it will be worse off for Israel, for sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, people don't seem to realise it in the UK, but I think if you go to the Middle East and you talk to people and you ask why there are wars going on there, they're like, oh yeah, of course it's because you've got a bunch of weak leaders in the West. We just think, we can do whatever we want. We've had sleepy Joe Biden in power, and now we got Keir Starmer. We'll do whatever we want. No one's going to hold us to account. People in the West don't seem to realise the influence that the leaders that we choose has on what goes on over there. We had this one from the Two-Tier Keir Twitter account. But just, so Keir Starmer's speech, I know that was funny, that return of the sausages thing, but on a more serious note, if you listened to more of the speech, one thing they were saying on the Spectator podcast earlier was it felt like it was kind of, his speech was not very well structured, and it was very clear that he had just plonked that in because he felt like he had to say it. He felt like he had to say something about the hostages. It wasn't like he really cared about it. Another thing that also felt plonked in is he's suddenly decided that he's going to house all homeless veterans, and that felt like it was plonked in because it seemed like he needed to do it. If you ask me, this perhaps shows that parties like Reform are starting to have an impact. All the pressure that they've put on Keir Starmer for taking away the winter fuel allowance and whatnot, and also, putting up migrants in flashy hotels and leaving veterans to sleep on the street. Maybe there's been a bit of an impact from that, and Keir Starmer feels like he needs to do something about it. So he's claimed he's going to house all veterans. I mean, whether it will actually happen or not, time will tell. But, I mean, Nicholas, do you think that this is a policy that Keir Starmer was planning to do all along and genuinely, feels in his heart that this is the right thing to do? Or do you think that this is just a reaction to the backlash he's received about the winter fuel payments and whatnot?
Oh, absolutely not. He was never intending to do this. He's a political opportunist. In fact, going back to your earlier point about Reform, I noticed how just after Nigel Farage got off stage, I get a BBC News notification. Starmer, Reeves and Rayner have all put out statements saying they're no longer going to be accepting gifts from Lord Alli. It's very, very, very convenient timing. And, Reform talks a lot about our veterans. And, I have encountered many, many, many homeless veterans on our streets. And the fact that we've sent these people to war and we can't even bother to take care of them, they are our own. They're our own people. They fought for liberty and freedom. They fought for our country. And yet we're prioritising these people coming over on the small boats. And it's clear that Starmer, in an ideal world, would let these people suffer and continue to prioritise people coming over on the small boats. But the question is, how are we going to house all these people, considering how there's already a backlog in terms of council? Very few council homes are being built at the moment. And, what little is being built is all going towards the people coming over on the channel, coming over on the small boats across the channel. It's a complete and utter joke. It's a disaster. And so I think Keir Starmer's really pulling this out of his backside. He actually has no intention of ever doing it. It's just a public policy statement to try and make him look good, because he doesn't want to be known as free gear Keir or two gear Keir or, the pensioner killer Keir or, whatever. I'm sure there are several thousand ways you can rhyme Keir, but no, he's a disgrace. He's an utter disgrace, and he's only doing this because he sees his poll numbers collapsing, and he's probably cold. He has to appear slightly more human, not like he wants everyone to freeze to death in the winter. So I know. Maybe using all the homes of all the pensioners who we killed this winter, we can now house all the veterans out in the summer. Be fantastic. Maybe that's how he's thinking about this.
Exactly. And also one thing I want to say about Keir Starmer's speech, it was so very obvious that he was either reading from something or he was looking at a teleprompter. And then you contrast that with Nigel Farage's speech, where he comes out. I'm sure there was a teleprompter somewhere, but he's speaking, off the cuff.
Oh no, there wasn't.
There wasn't. Okay, so exactly. He's speaking off the cuff. No. He's engaging with the crowd. He's making jokes. So if I was a lawmaker, and I really mean this, we should ban teleprompters for politicians, because a politician should have such a clear view and a clear vision of what they want to do that they shouldn't need a teleprompter. It should come from the heart. They should speak it from the heart. And as you said, Chloe, it was just this monotone snooze fest where we were just reading off something, whether it's a teleprompter or a page in front of him. Whereas Nigel Farage's one was this, engaging, funny, light works going off, party vibe. And that's exactly what these two different leaders are. And as you said, but the thing is, if Keir Starmer wants to be more popular, he needs to be a bit more like Nigel Farage. He needs to be a bit more charismatic. He needs to be
I don't think he can. He's been going to voice coaching and stuff. Apparently, he's trying, but he's just I feel like Nigel's kind of born with something. Yeah, you can. Yeah. I mean, you can train it a bit. I mean, like when I was a kid, I was super shy. Like there are people who knew me when I was a kid who were like, I can't believe that you do what you do now, because when you're a kid, you wouldn't speak a word. So like you can train it to an extent, but I feel like he's tried and he's failed. I mean, we had someone, I've just brought up this comment, someone saying that his speech today was robotic and without passion. I think that's the case too. I think that if you are going to speak passionately, you can't fake it unless you're a pretty epic actor. If you are not in politics because you genuinely love it and you genuinely care, for example, about these homeless veterans on the street, you're not going to talk with passion. People can read right through it, and that's the reality of it. Let's move away from what's going on with Labour. There was a clip that came to me this week that I thought was quite interesting. So this is from Peter Hitchens talking about net zero on Question Time, and I think this is important because I think we'll probably have people on the stream who've got a mix of views on climate change. You'll have some people think that it's more urgent than others, but I think that what this does is it shows it doesn't matter what you think. It doesn't matter if you think that climate change is super serious or you think it's nothing to worry about. Everyone on all sides should agree that net zero, if you just look at the facts, is going to do bugger all. So take a listen to this. I thought that he put this really, really well.
What do people actually think they're achieving? Anybody can look at it's called the energy dashboard. You can get it up on your computer anytime and see on a normal day in this country where the power which is lighting your home and your place of work and everything else you see, where it's coming from. And on a day when the wind isn't blowing, it's largely coming from gas. Or it's coming from imported power, which quite often comes from the Netherlands, where they still burn coal. We don't burn coal anymore because we didn't just close down our coal-fired power stations, we blew them up. We were so certain we were right to do so. At the same time, China is, even as we speak, building the equivalent of two new coal-fired power stations a week. India has a vast expansion program of coal-fired power stations, even if George is right about his tremendous predictions of apocalypse. Even if he's right, the contribution which this country is making by what it's doing to these outcomes is not merely minimal, it's non-existent. Everything that we do is completely blotted out by what much larger countries are doing to maintain their own power. Now, if you want to live in a country with net zero, if you want to live in a country where nobody can afford to heat their house, where people have incredibly expensive and largely non-functioning heat pumps inflicted on them, if you want that kind of thing to happen to you, if you want lots of people to lose their jobs because there's no energy, if you want to be cold all the time, if you want the computers which make life possible in practically every form of life to shut down every so often, then carry on believing that the demand to go for net zero, to keep it in the ground, is intelligent and thoughtful. What do people...
I mean, I
Exactly.
think that is absolutely brilliant. I couldn't have said it better myself. I mean, Eunice, you did a video recently on net zero, or rather, you spoke on GB News about it. And don't you just think that what Peter Hitchens does here is he really shows that the argument for net zero is purely moralistic. It's not based on any facts at all.
Yeah, it's absolutely nonsense because, as I said on GB News, we live on the same planet, okay? So exporting our energy sources to countries like China, India, and Saudi Arabia doesn't make sense because we live all on the same planet, and it's called climate change, right? So what we are doing is that we are exporting money essentially. Well, that's exactly what we're doing. We're exporting money. We can drill for oil. We can drill, for coal. We have all kinds of different other energy sources. But then what we are doing, we are putting a strain on the consumer for no point whatsoever. Because the carbon emissions that this country emits is less than 1% of the total global emissions. And China does about almost 30% of total emissions in the world come from China. Think about that, 30%. And I think India does 10 to 15, 20%. And then, you have Saudi, you have America, and then all other countries combined. So what we are doing is not making any difference. It's hurting the British consumer because they have to pay a much higher price for energy essentially, and then some people can't afford it, and that's why we have the living crisis that we have now, because people can't afford their bills anymore. And it's because of these stupid net zero policies where people have to pay double, triple. And the same thing's happening in America actually, and that's why Trump keeps saying drill baby drill. Why? Because America has a lot of oil. Why are they buying oil from Venezuela? Why are they buying oil from Saudi Arabia? It just doesn't make sense. So I think in these countries we need to realize that we are not some saints. We have no moral obligation. Okay, fine, if climate change is real, and it probably is, I just don't think human beings that have that much of an influence. Okay, and even if they do, it needs to be a concentrated effort by the whole globe. China, India, Saudi Arabia, America, all of us. We just say, okay, fine, you know what? We're not going to use fossil fuels anymore. Until that happens, it's not going to make a difference whether Britain does it, And it's making this country poorer. Fundamentally, it's making America poorer, it's making Europe poorer, and it's making America poorer. And they're going to fall in behind countries such as China, India, Saudi, and etc.
Now, I mean, just to play devil's advocate, Nicholas, some people will argue that even if we make a very small contribution and in the grand scheme of things, Britain won't change whether the world goes up in flames or not. Some people will say, well, this is a collective action problem. No one country is going to change the outcome, but we've all got to be in it together, and that it's crucial that Britain sets an example. China and other big countries, they're never going to change if they don't see that we're doing the right thing, so we should do it anyway. What would you say to that?
Well, I think that is just complete naivety. If China sees that we're cutting emissions, they're not going to say, oh my God, Keir Starmer is doing such an amazing job. You know what we're also going to do? We're also going to introduce free speech in China. No, they're going to laugh at us.
Exactly.
They're going to laugh at us.
That's a good point,
actually. They're going to laugh at us and kick us while we're down. They want us to do all of this insane climate stuff because it reduces our output and it makes us more reliant upon China and India and Russia and all these other countries where they're not abiding by this climate nonsense. And this is why back in 2017, when Donald Trump pulled the United States out of the climate accords and everyone went mental, that was ultimately a good thing for his economy, because guess who else is a signature of the climate accords? China. And look at what China's doing. They're not making any efforts whatsoever to depollute. If anything, it's getting worse over there. So why in God's name should we have to sacrifice our economy to try and, get the Chinese on board with being eco-friendly when they're clearly not going to do that? And all that's going to do is increase China's geopolitical influence and their global influence over the economy. It is a joke. So anybody saying that is absurdly naive and doesn't really understand global dynamics.
But I mean,
and if they wanted to, they could have introduced democracy. We've been trying to export democracy for the last 50 to 100 years. Why are they not following us in that lead, as Nicholas said?
Well, exactly. Exactly.
Do you think that there is anything that we can do to persuade China to change their ways and to be more green? Like, can we put a load of... If we really, really started to think, shit, guys, the planet's really warming up. We think our emissions are making a really huge difference to the world. Let's say this is this might not be for another 20, 30 or however many years, but let's say shit hits the fan and we really do need China to change their actions. Is it possible? Can we put a load of sanctions on them? Do we have the power to do it, or are we're just going to have to deal with
let's look at the
China
example
does?
of Russia after Ukraine. We put the motherload of all sanctions on Russia, and what are we seeing right now? They promised that this would crash the Russian economy. Putin would have to withdraw all of his troops from Ukraine, and he'd start wearing a peace necklace. No, the Russian economy actually is doing better than the British economy at the moment. They're seeing larger GDP on average. And what's going to happen is if we put a bunch of sanctions on China, we're going to still buy their products, like the EU still buys Russian gas, but at a much higher price through India or China for a second party. So if anything, sanctions are not going to work. They're not going to work. And plus, China would just, put a gun to the global economy and say, okay, you sanction us, we will stop producing all of your terrible e-scooters and all of that. We will stop exporting. We'll stop it. So effectively, China is holding the entire world hostage. So if we want to completely crush our economy and at the same time have higher prices, then be my guest. Follow through with Greta Thunberg's weird green cult agenda. And
good thing you say that, Nicholas, because that was the perfect segue to what I'm going to show you next.
Oh, fantastic!
So, because Greta Thunberg, she was into the whole climate thing, but then Palestine just got a bit cooler, so it became more trendy. So she sort of segued to that, and Greta Thunberg was singing, or should I say, screeching, at a pro-Palestine rally, and just take a listen to the contents of what she's actually saying. Also, I'll probably point out before I play this, I bet you that car is not electric that she's singing out of. Anyway, take a listen to this.
Show me what the people looks like. Show me what power looks like. Show me what democracy looks like. Show me what democracy looks like.
She's so cringe.
Show me what the people look like.
She has such a beautiful voice.
Show me what power looks
Just
like.
cringeworthy.
One struggle, one fight. Climate justice, human rights.
She can't hit the notes.
No, which is clearly not professionally trained.
Struggle, one
Oh
fight.
God.
Climate justice, human rights.
Maybe she should go to Star
I
Wars
won't make you
coach.
watch it again because your eardrums might bleed. But,
Oh my God.
I mean, that was just absolutely hilarious. But I mean, Eunice, she's there at a pro-Palestinian rally. She's talking about Gaza, and then she's saying, "Show me what democracy looks like." I mean, I might be wrong, but I mean, is she suggesting that there's democracy in Gaza, and that's the example we should be following?
But that's exactly what the woke mind virus does, They would take
Gays for
positions that is completely contradictory to the reality. There is no such thing as democracy in Gaza. If you want a free Palestinian, if you want democracy in Palestine, you have to get rid of these groups such as Hamas. And if you want democracy in southern Lebanon, you have to get rid of Hezbollah. And if you want democracy, you have to get rid of the Islamic Republic of Iran. But these people, as I said, it's the woke mind virus. They can't think. I just wanted to make one more point about the previous video and the environment and people like Greta Thunberg and people that have this woke mind virus. I actually studied this in depth, and when I came out of university, I was actually a very pro-environmentalist person. I was like, yeah, we have to go green. But now I actually truly believe that we actually need carbon for a healthy environment. And Jordan Peterson said something very interesting. He was like, if you want to tackle the environmental issue, first you need to develop the undeveloped world, because people in the underdeveloped world, they don't actually care about the environment until their GDP per capita goes to $5,000 per year, right? So you need to tackle that, and the world still has a lot of growing to do. Like, fossil fuels are absolutely paramount into growing the economy of especially the underdeveloped world, so countries in Africa, some countries in Asia. So we're gonna need fossil fuels for the next 50 to 100 years. And yeah, that's all I've got to say. And these people really need to stop. It's the woke mind virus, and it's literally taking the West backwards to the point of we're going broke, and our morals are deteriorating and we are siding with the wrong side, all, disguised as, oh, we're so empathetic. No, you're not empathetic. You're stupid.
So, well, I mean, maybe Greta is merely celebrating.
Yeah, Paul says that Greta is Eurovision material. Do you agree, Nicholas?
Oh, completely. I mean, she has got such a beautiful voice. I must say, she should really represent Sweden at the next Eurovision. But I'll tell you right now, I think Greta might be supporting Hamas because their actions have actually led to the complete deindustrialization of Gaza. So, I mean, maybe from a climate perspective, maybe that's why. Maybe that's why
they've got no economy left, so they won't be polluting at all. Oh, what a!
I know, it's brilliant.
Absolutely.
Like the dolphins will return, like we saw in the pandemic. But no, I mean, she is a complete joke. She's a grifter. I mean, as we saw last year with her fake arrest at a climate protest, she's trying to become this sort of hard, all-around activist, yet she's picking the wrong fights. She is now supporting what's effectively a terroristic death cult. I mean, let's face it, Hamas is not somebody you really want to align yourself with. I mean, they keep weapons in hospitals and near playgrounds. I mean, come on.
I know, she's there singing about democracy and human rights. I mean, she's just deluded. And people are like, oh, this is such a smart young girl. She's so much smarter than all the politicians that don't know anything about the climate or human rights.
She's an absolute moron.
I know.
Completely.
But do you know what? I googled her age. She's actually 21 now. She looks like she's still 12, I have to say.
Yeah, she hasn't grown.
No.
She needs to eat more meat.
I thought she hadn't even been through puberty.
She's 20. She's 21. I mean, someone said in the chat in response to her singing that her voice is just starting to break. Right, guys, we are about to bring the podcast to an end, but before we do, we're going to finish on a funny note, and I want to show you another one of these brilliant AI videos that have come out. I love these, and this is where Keir goes to Clarkson's pub.
Jeremy, I have to say that pint was blimmin' marvellous. I'll have one more, please, my old pal.
Yeah, okay, mate. I just need to go down to the basement to change the keg.
Yeah, no worries, mate.
Bloody hell, it's been a tough day at the office today.
I've seen this.
Everyone in the flipping media.
I love this one.
It's funny calling it free gear Keir. Wait, what's this? Oh, great. Oh, for God's sake, of course, you're bloody in here. If my day couldn't get any fucking worse, you seriously can't go one day without a pint, can you?
Yeah, what on God's green earth are you doing here? They don't do free pints in here, mate.
Nigel, can you stop with the flipping jokes for one goddamn day? They're starting to get on my blimmin' wick.
Oh, sod this crap. I'm going for a piss.
Right, here you go, Nigel. Wait, Keir, what the hell are you doing here?
I've come in for a pint.
Check the bloody sign, mate.
Oh, for God's sake, Jeremy, why the hell have you barred me from your bloody pub?
Get the hell out of here.
This is precisely the reason why I want to ban smoking in pub gardens. In fact, let me inspect your pub gardens right this bloody second.
No, you're barred. Get out.
Move out my sodding way. Nigel, what the hell are you doing smoking out here? I thought you went to the toilet.
Oh, shit.
Come with me, you're under arrest.
I can't believe he's put me back in bloody prison again. Jeremy, I have to say...
It's brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah.
I just love how during the election, I think it was the BBC actually thought for a brief moment these were real. And I think one of their commentators...
I'm not surprised.
Nigel's doing Minecraft videos now. I mean...
guys, I just want to show you a quick picture of me and Nigel. And, that's why I really like Nigel, because he's a very, impersonable person. And I remember when I was in Clacton, I went to go and see him because I was working on his campaign in communication strategy. And basically we were out in campaigning. And then during lunchtime, we all met at a pub, actually. We all met at a pub and we were all having a drink, and Nigel was having his cigarette and a pint. So this is me and Nigel Farage. I don't know if you can see.
Oh, yeah, we can see. Oh, lovely.
Oh my God, that's brilliant.
Yeah, that's me and Nigel Farage just having a pint together. I got him a little Guinness and he was having a smoke in the pub garden. So there we go.
Hey, brilliant.
Well, he's such a nice bloke. Really nice bloke.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
when I was at the Reform rally I mean, I was sat on the bottom level of the bus on the final day. And without anybody noticing, he came over and actually said hello to all of us staff members who were on the bottom of the bus, shook all of our hands individually, asked us all each how we were doing. And he was going on stage in 5 minutes. So he was literally shaking like 10 people's hands and getting to know everybody just before he went on stage. He's a very nice bloke, really lovely man, very nice bloke, very personal.
And on that cheery note, guys, let's bring the podcast to an end. I'm sure people have got more exciting things to get up to, like going to bed or going to the pub. Maybe you're going to have a cheeky smoke in the pub garden. Go on, you want to.
Wow. I don't smoke, but I'll do it just to.
I'm not a smoker, but
I'm on a
Keir
detox, guys. I'm on a
Starmer's,
detox till
smoking
Halloween.
ban.
I feel like I had a good summer.
Okay,
I'm gonna stay away.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you. You'll be nice and healthy. All right, folks. Thank you everyone for watching. Thank you for your lovely comments. Thank you for supporting the channel, and we will see you all next week when hopefully we'll be joined again by Darren and Alex. See you soon.